Some shaking prices at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange right after the WASDE report from the United States Department of Agriculture. Here to comment that is Jerry Gidel from Midland Research on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. So Jerry, we have seen those prices going up and down during this week. Soybeans closed up this Friday and corn is down. What do you think is the impact of the report on that?
Well, the USDA definitely threw the trade and even myself a little bit of a curve here from the standpoint that after we had the nearly 5.8 million of million metric tons of purchases from China, and that came in the week before the report, instead of raising their 2.55 billion bushel estimate for corn exports, they only moved it up 50. And boy, that caught everybody off guard from the standpoint that when you have, a 230 million increase in sales, you'd think that would have an impact on the carryovers, the ending exports and the ending carryover stock, I should say, from there. But the USDA became quite creative here, and there's to some extent there's some connection to that from the point of view that we are with higher corn prices. There is a possibility of countries around the world to utilize more of their wheat crop for a energy source instead of for a food source, and they did quite adjustments, particularly in China. We've had recently some significant Chinese sales out of reserve that went quite quickly. So there was some indications that maybe they were utilizing some of that wheat for livestock type of livestock style of feeding, and that. So they increased their expectations for the Chinese by 5 million metric tons, and they also increased the rest of the world numbers by a similar total. And so that actually subtly then changed their carryover, their ending stocks internally. They estimated that to go up 4.5 million metric tons. So in essence, we had a 5 million or 5.5 million purchase and a 4.5 million going right into stocks, which is, it's not being exactly the same because, of course, they're going to blend some of this corn into the rations and stuff like that. But definitely kind of surprising that a country like China would buy something and then decide to use something else instead at the same magnitude, and that's to keep their stocks unchanged. I guess to some extent that was definitely a curve that I didn't see coming, and many other people in the industry, including most of the major commercials here and around the world. So that was the real feature. Came out. It took a while to figure out exactly how the details worked out. But that being said, at 575 was kind of the classic buy the rumor and then sell the fact when the USDA did not. And I wasn't expecting them to go up to 3 billion or anything like that. I was anticipating about a 200 million increase. And that being said, when you were anticipating carryover stock to move down from 1.5 down to closer to 1.2 or 1.3 billion, and it didn't do that, that definitely did as a shock. Now you looked over on the soybean side. Yes, they went ahead and did the 20 million that a lot of people projected. I acknowledge the fact that that could happen last week. And it was kind of known information, nothing exciting there. And also, as we talked about before, I think the world also realizes that we have this big crop in South America that's really on our doorstep here to the world trade. And so I think there was, unless we can come up with further damaging weather in Argentina or maybe end up having some of the yield ideas in Brazil calm down, and that from the point of view of 133 million, which our friends in Brazil went ahead and confirmed again this week that they feel confident there's a 133 crop out there. And their corn number actually, I forgot they were actually all the way down at 102 million metric tons. They went back up to 105 on their numbers that were released uh, on Thursday or Wednesday or Thursday of this week. So in this essence, the numbers are not tightening further and on an overall basis. So everybody's kind of decided to step off of the sidelines, and we'll have to figure out if I think there's still definitely lots of issues here and a lot of reasons why this market's going to be very tight going forward. The key thing is that we don't have the specific numbers in front of us right here short term. And the interesting twist is it always happens in this when we've had a lot of people in the livestock areas around the world and that kind of feel like they missed the boat here on this rally in that. And guess what? Today we had two countries in the Central America, Guatemala and also Costa Rica, buy some significant amount of corn here, both for this year and next year. So I think that's going on even in the domestic side of the U.S. And so we are, everyone's gathering their needs here. And so if anything starts to get a little tough, where the rationing ideas that were really prevalent here a week or 10 days ago could even get more significant later in the season if we have problems around the world.
Yes, I was just going to comment that CONEP just followed the USDA, and they published a very conservative estimate regarding the crops. They are really awaiting to see what's going on before telling that the crop is going to be significantly reduced.
Yeah, it is quite interesting considering the first crop corn and soybeans there that were in the Rio Grande and also up into Paranod and some other areas, maybe into southern parts of Mato Grosso del Sol. Those areas, and I think you pointed out on one of your updates that there's definitely some crops that have been hurt out there. And to some extent, I think there's also an issue, interestingly enough, on the early beans that are being potentially harvested in Mato Grosso. I think the yields on those are going to be tainted. The key to this whole thing is that this, I have to say, maybe the middle of January to now, maybe a month of on and on better moisture in Mato Grosso is going to be able to boost the yields there to get to that total. At this point, it's a big area up there in Mato Grosso. So I think the government and the USDA have both decided to punt in the old classic football approach to this thing, and then decide what to do once we get a little better information coming out of the harvests in Brazil. Right now, the Argentine side, as I mentioned before, it was looking pretty tough down there. The rains of 10 days, 2 weeks ago, definitely have stabilized things. But problem is that Argentina is back in somewhat of a dry regime. So I'm not sure we've heard the last of the issues that might hit in Argentina. But I'm looking from way up here in Chicago. I'm not really looking down in the locals' backyard down there. So it's we all make judgments, and at this point, it's we still got some more time to figure out how much we're going to come out of the crops down there. But the weather this year has been so erratic. I'd have to say that that isn't a good situation to get the best yields.
Yes, I spoke to many analysts, and a lot of them are very optimistic about especially corn prices. But some of them are saying that we are starting the best crop cycle with prices for the next 1 or 2 years. Do you think that it's exaggerate to say, at least right now?
Wow. Well, definitely, there's been a lot of talk of what they kind of throw around. I think you're kind of saying that the super cycle in commodities is here, and it's kind of pointing back to maybe 2010 to 2012 or 13, that kind of stuff. I definitely feel like that this market is going to, once you get your supplies whittled down here in the U.S., and you really think about this. 2 years ago, it's kind of more like a year and a half ago on the actual fall periods of things, we had 900 million carryover stock in the end of 2019. Here we are in the beginning, early 2021, and we're talking about a number at 120 million. That's a huge difference. And now the one twist of it is that once you have the beginning stocks down so dramatically, you have to have a good crop in front of you every year. And that becomes difficult. It really does. And I think that's one of the things that the USDA is going to try to update people on their U.S. Ag Outlook the end of next week.
Yes, and what are the things you are seeing on this update?
Well, back in the fall, the USDA put out what they call the baseline numbers, and that, which is kind of an early internal type of information that is actually mandated by the old farm programs, and that, so that there's something out there for the Congress to look at. I think a lot of people don't put a lot of faith in what their numbers are, but in particular this year, these things were put together back in October, early November, and that at the time they were looking at a slight reduction in corn. We just had a 90.9 kind of plantings this last year, and they looked at 90 million. And on the bean side, they looked at 89 million, which is up from like the 83.5 number that we planted this year. And that, based upon what they saw at the time, I think that going into this report, or this update, which will be on the Friday, actually, when some of the final numbers will be out, and that is going to end up being looked upon as at least that there's going to have some adjustments in these planted numbers because of the price changes we've experienced since last November. And that corn particularly has really made a big difference. We were talking about prices on cash basis under $4. Now we're talking about prices on spot corn at over $5, and that. And so myself and others had decided that we needed to increase, or at least anticipate the USDA to increase this number. It's in the 92 to 93 million acre level. I'm at 92.5. I've seen an average from the trade at 92.6 or 7, or 7 and 8, I should say. And on beans, I originally was anticipating beans to have a stronger level, but the interesting twist on it is that America's farmers, if there's a good corn price out there, they tend to kind of gravitate to it. We're going to have a big increase in beans because of the prevent planting acres coming in, and that's going to be in areas that are more favorable for soybeans up there in the Dakotas and maybe some areas in the Southeast, and that. But in those cases, interestingly enough, once we end up getting these additional acres in, and now the tighter stocks, we're still going to be looking at some pretty, interesting levels. I think my number came in at 1.7 ending carryover stock there on corn, and 140 million again on soybeans, and that. So, that really puts things in perspective, where we're really going to be very constantly we're worried about the weather situation, what's going on in the demand world. How are people looking at their supplies around the world? What hoarding might be going on? How much taxes might export taxes are happening? This is going to be a very tight, emotional type period here in the markets. And if something does kind of go snafu, things can get quite emotional. And right now, at least, I kind of feel like we're going to kind of have a little respite in here for maybe until we get more knowledge about South America. But if it isn't all that good, or the weather in the U.S. doesn't turn out that well, we could be fired back up this spring and summer.
Indeed. Thanks a lot, Jerry.
Thanks. Good to always be with you there, Lewis.